Want to play a game? I'll describe the setting, plot, and characters of popular franchises, and you have to guess which one I'm talking about. Ready? Okay, here we go. So it's a fantasy world with 7 kingdoms of men and different cultures who need to mobilize their forces to fight an army of undead skeleton warriors who reside in a frozen, snowy wasteland in the north, led by a magical evil entity whose name is ominous word plus king, and has spikes on his head with glowing blue eyes and a freaking undead dragon as a pet. Am I talking about Game of Thrones or World of Warcraft? Too difficult? Maybe I'm being unfair. Let's try again. It's a fantasy story where the dragons return after being dead for a while, and it largely takes place in a northern kingdom caught in a civil war for the throne. And in the background, there's giants that have mammoths as pets, and undead zombie warriors with glowing blue eyes. Wait, now it could be either Skyrim or Game of Thrones. This is getting too confusing, but perhaps it's my fault. Maybe it's because I'm reaching across several mediums, including games, books, and television shows. Of course there'd be eerie similarities in so broad a spectrum. Let's pick a single medium of entertainment then. Let's go with video games. It's a sci-fi setting where future human space marines are caught between an ancient rivalry of 2 incredibly deadly alien species. One is a biological hive mind that quickly produces massive amounts of disgusting and deadly bug-like swarms that overwhelm an area and can even contaminate people and seed them with their genetic material. And the other is a sentient but mysterious mystical warrior race that are paradoxically more technologically advanced than humans, but organized with medieval warrior values, and fight primarily with blades that sprout from their wrists. I'm talking StarCraft, right? Or maybe I'm talking about the Alien vs. Predator games. Maybe it's the medium. Games might be too derivative now that I think about it. Don't get me wrong, video games are awesome, but oftentimes the developers who make games are simply inspired by the lore they pick up from things they've read or stuff they've watched, and they just turn that into a game. It's a typical strategy for game developers. Helldivers 2 is a good example, where they generously helped themselves to large bites out of Paul Verhoeven's adaptation of Starship Troopers. So let's try with a franchise that is larger, but more distinct in its aesthetic, and is so characteristic in its setting and lore that even when it's a book series, a movie, or even a video game, you can still immediately tell this franchise apart from all the others, because it's just so darn unique in its look. Alright, let's go. It's a space opera setting, where civilization has spread throughout the galaxy, and technology is very advanced when compared to ours, but has also stagnated for the last tens of thousands of years. And society still isn't very modern either. It's basically feudalism in space, ruled by a powerful human emperor with psychic powers, who runs a xenophobic human supremacist empire that has a space inquisition that enforces his will, and there's even an order of religious warrior space Templar monks running around in the setting. Oh, and the people with psychic powers actually channel their power from this mysterious ether that connects the galaxy together, and is immensely useful, but can also be a source of corruption that makes some of these space wizards become weird, ugly cultists with deformed faces that enslave people. Is this Warhammer 40k or Star Wars? People like to joke about how 40k is a lot edgier than Star Wars, but it's got all the same elements. It's only hopped up on some serious shrooms, you know what I'm saying? Star Wars even has space inquisitors prowling about causing trouble. But I do admit they still have their differences. I mean, in 40k, the Galactic Emperor is actually successful in ruling the galaxy for more than 30 years. He manages to keep his empire for tens of thousands of years, and has a whole army of fanatically devoted sexy ladies fighting for the Imperium. Oh crap, now it's just Dune on a crap load of steroids. But we all knew this. I admit I'm just being cheeky to prove a point. However, let's play this game one final time, and I'll be as specific as I can possibly be, and let's see if we can finally escape this trap. I'm thinking of a children's book about a boy whose name starts with H and ends in Y, and who goes to a magical school to learn how to be a wizard, and there he makes friends and learns about an evil dark wizard who threatens the school with a huge beast that will prowl about its hallways to threaten the students. And, get this, it's a book written by a woman whose first name starts with J and ends with E, and her last name vaguely rhymes with Bolin. Unbelievably specific, right? The book's name is Wizard's Hall. It was written by Jane Yolen and published in 1991, a few years before Harry Potter, and it's shockingly similar to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets book. But what's funny is that the idea for Henry the Boy Wizard came to Jane Yolen in a dream, and Joanne Kathleen Rowling had a similar moment of inspiration where Harry Potter the Boy Wizard appeared in her imagination. In this instance, I believe it's a case of synchronized thinking. Two people in similar circumstances having very similar epiphanies. But in most of the other cases I mentioned, it really is just large corporations or estates ripping each other off. And it used to be a big deal back in the day, believe it or not. Frank Herbert, the man who wrote the Dune books, apparently considered suing George Lucas for copyright infringement after Star Wars came out in theaters. And yeah, I get it. It's hard to see a movie so similar to the book you wrote about a young boy with a biblical name on a desert planet who is initiated into an ancient spiritual tradition involving the expansion of mental abilities. But Frank Herbert himself isn't that unique either. His story about a failing galactic empire and the rise of new social orders guided by small shadowy groups of intellectuals who developed a method for calculating the future, and the rise of an immensely powerful war leader with psychic powers who threatens to conquer the entire galaxy is really not that different from Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. When it comes to intellectual property, the standards used to be a little higher than they are now. Like how the Shazam character that we know and love today from DC Comics was actually owned by a company named Fawcett. Back then, he used to be called Captain Marvel, and he was once the most popular superhero character, even outselling Superman himself. He was also the first superhero to be adapted to film. But all that changed when DC Comics sued Fawcett over Captain Marvel, allegedly being copyright infringement of Superman, and eventually gained the rights over the character and changed his name to Shazam. I admit I don't understand this lawsuit very well, but it seems to me that this brutal legal fight was on the basis that both characters are dark-haired, muscular uber chads in colorful tights with a cape and a symbol on their chests. But this is insane because as far as Superman ripoffs go, Shazam is one of the most original, having a completely different backstory, theme, and source for his powers. You know, being a 12-year-old boy who magically shapeshifts into a superhero and all. Could be worse, like changing the name of Krypton to Viltrum and then calling it a day. This is just hilarious to me, since these days, Superman ripoffs are a dime a dozen, and some of them are way more blatant in their similarities. Superman has got to be the most ripped off character in history at this point. Omni-Man from Invincible and Homelander from The Boys got real lucky that they emerged later, before all that hostile legal environment. But yeah, the insane intellectual property standards from the DC versus Fawcett lawsuit couldn't be maintained for very long. So I guess DC figured that if they couldn't beat them, they should join them. Because what ended up happening is that when one of the Superman ripoffs becomes super popular, DC would just rip off the ripoffs whenever Superman got rebooted. Like how the Kill the Justice League video game was just DC ripping off The Boys from Amazon Prime. And the My Adventures with Superman TV show was DC ripping off Invincible, also from Amazon Prime, by making Krypton an expanding, conquering empire fought for by a brainwashed family member, in this case Supergirl, that Superman must redeem from her imperialist ways. Making the entertainment industry just one big cycle of intellectual property incest. There are several levels of creative inbreeding going on here. It's just a cycle of copying nowadays. Ripping off other franchises is not only legally permitted, but expected. Which is good news for the Flash Gets guys here on YouTube, who created their Space King show. Games Workshop got real quiet when that dropped. But what are they gonna do? Games Workshop is notoriously ruthless over copyright these days, which is ironic considering how they're the most shameless Dune ripoff in popular culture right now. And no matter how much they whine or pout, you can't copyright the concept of armored troopers in space fighting for a xenophobic human imperium ruled by a space wizard emperor with an inquisition, because then Disney would be all over their asses. But this is good news for us. It means we don't have to complain so much about all the great franchises going to crap because of clueless corporate shills. Since what made those franchises great are, in part, archetypes and concepts that belong to our universal human heritage. We don't need to endlessly complain about how The Last Jedi rule in Star Wars. We can literally make fan fiction of the Star Wars universe, change some names around, and then put it out there to sell for other fans to enjoy. I know this because Hollywood itself does this all the time. I'm talking about Zack Snyder with his Netflix movie called Rebel Moon. Apparently that movie wasn't appreciated, but someone out there could do it better. Not me though. I was messing around with this in my webcomic Facto Fables, but it didn't turn out well because I tried writing it like a YouTube video essay because of my plan was to make videos out of it and then post it on the channel, but had to change up the plan and the format didn't work as a comic, being too reliant on narration instead of an actual story. I wanted to make a cross between a story and an essay to make it a reflection on narrative that revealed itself in narrative form, but I experimented with the narrative format too close to the sun and had to cancel it because nobody liked it, but maybe I'll try again, who knows. Anyway, fan fiction of copyright content changing a few names around to sell is actually pretty common. 50 Shades of Grey, which became tremendously successful, is famously nothing but Twilight fanfiction. People blame superheroes for being nothing but generic fanfiction of itself, but as far as genres go, the superhero genre is actually a lot more creative with unique entries when compared to the more classy stuff that snobby people pat themselves on the back for enjoying. Things being derivative and looking awfully the same is an issue across all genres. That silly meme on Reddit actually had a point, go figure. But my point is that the actual concepts and things that you actually can copyright are quite narrow. You can't copyright a concept, idea, narrative beats, or even names. Try copywriting Space Marine and see what happens. It's why GW came up with Astartes. Though Space Marine can be trademarked, but that's another issue. You can't copyright ideas, only tangible expressions of ideas. You can't have a character called Superman who wears red and blue and is an alien from Krypton, but you can call him Omni-Man, replace the blue with white, give him a porn stash and say he's an alien from Viltrum. But what constitutes as a tangible expression is pretty nebulous, because only a few decades ago you couldn't have a character with vastly different backstory, power set, and theme just because he's a caped and muscular brunette in tights who can fly. Also, the Guardians of the Globe in the Invincible comics is basically just the Justice League. I mean, who are we kidding? And with the multiverse as a narrative concept, where variations of the same person can manifest itself across different universes, they basically are. And the Invincible show knows this because their knockoff Spider-Man basically admits this.
Look, I saw the portal. I know you're from another dimension. Got way too much experience with that, especially lately. So, trust me, I'm the good guy here.
They know what they're doing. I mean, for crying out loud, Invincible as a character literally meets Batman in the multiverse.
You're a man who dresses like a bat, and your name is, well, don't you think that's kind of lazy?
But the show doesn't reveal his face to avoid legal issues. My point is that you can easily bypass copyright these days, even on a narrative level. Just make a superhero with spider powers, call him Arachnid Kid. Make references to a spider hero society in the multiverse, and boom, you literally have Spider-Man in your story, or one of his variants, at least. And Marvel probably can't do shit, I think. Am I wrong? If there's an American lawyer in the comments, feel free to correct me. But there's a bigger threat to copyright these days. An enemy that no superhero or space marine can defeat. I'm of course talking about generative AI. Already with Google VO3, any bro can make an impressive blockbuster level quality video using characters from beloved franchises, and they're already quite incredible, if still a little goofy. But it means that we don't have to wait decades for a Halo adaptation to come out only for childless 40-year-old women in the writer's room of Paramount Studios to ruin it anymore, because any bro in his pajamas can make fun adaptations of some of the best scenes in the game. Yeah, it's AI slop, but it can be your AI slop instead of a multi-million-dollar Hollywood slop made by people with daddy issues who hate the franchise for toxic masculinity or whatever. But I admit I am somewhat disturbed about AI, and if we use it wrong, it'll dumb us down and further degrade the quality of art, making it even more generic, derivative, and less original, leading to creative inbreeding so bad it would be like the Habsburgs moved to Alabama. Though I actually like the Habsburgs. Is generative AI theft and copyright infringement? That's the question that we have to answer now as a society. Perhaps it isn't if you use it in a fair use capacity, like in a YouTube video essay, for example, since it's fair use and not theft if you feature copyrighted images and footage from anime, movies, or even internet art from independent artists in a YouTube essay. Therefore, using AI images that were trained on copyrighted images basically amounts to the same thing, right? It's why I felt it was okay to experiment with in my videos, although I'm having second thoughts now. And even though the copyright system can protect the IP of small creators, it can also be abused by large corporations who hurt them when enforced in a draconian way. Like when you lose monetization in your videos because of a few seconds of music, or when a fan artist posting Luigi art gets a cease and desist letter from Nintendo or something. But I do think the big tech AI firms themselves are basically stealing intellectual property in how they train their AI. Which is a problem, but this technology is so powerful that intellectual property itself as a concept might die or at least be significantly diminished, since it's becoming increasingly difficult to enforce it. It sucks, I know, but we are all having our work trained against us. I discovered that my YouTube scripts themselves are used to train these LLM models. I don't think there is any going back, even if I wish there were. But even if it does destroy the concept of copyright, it won't ever destroy art. Intellectual property as an idea didn't always exist, but art always has. It's how stories like King Arthur organically spread throughout Europe with the contributions of many authors. AI is a controversial issue for good reason, even if my personal position on it is nuanced. I dislike the negative effect it has on real human art, and I personally wish generative AI wasn't a thing, but it is a thing, so I thought the best thing to do was to use it to help artists instead of replacing them. Like in my last Skyrim animation, where we hired a real artist to make the keyframes, and then we tried using AI ourselves to animate in between the frames, maybe get rid of some of the busy work. I was trying to find an ethical way to use this tech where I could pay artists while also reducing production costs for more complex projects. My goal was to reduce the workload of overworked animators and increase the number of projects we could do, therefore allowing us to hire more artists for more projects. But a lot of people understandably get angry when AI is used, since its very existence is putting a new pressure on all of us in the creative fields. I'm a writer. I've been replaced by ChatGPT in a commission myself. It's not just people who draw, which made me feel like I had to adapt or die in my YouTube career. But I could never use ChatGPT to write my video essay scripts, not even under this pressure. I felt like that was just killing my own voice. Why make these videos if the perspective and worldview in these essays aren't even my own? As I tried finding acceptable ways to use this technology, I admit that I made mistakes along the way, but I'm glad I could listen to your voices in this community and use your perspectives to help morally navigate this new world we're entering. But this channel isn't just me. It's 4 of us who chip in, and we all have different opinions on AI. My friends who sometimes help with the editing love AI, while Gabi, our resident human artist who feels like a dinosaur and saw her commissions disappear, understandably dislikes it. While I'm here in the middle as a writer and editor, worried that years of work will go down the drain depending on which direction the internet goes. But this video isn't about the merits or problems of generative AI, only the effects of its presence, because it's already leading to what I call intellectual property piracy, where companies like Disney or Universal Studios are effectively losing control of their franchises. People already use AI to flesh out better versions of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and this was before VO3 came out. Of course, this is why Disney and Universal Studios filed a massive lawsuit against Midjourney, and these entertainment companies appear to be rallying against AI firms, but I don't think it will work. Because even if Western AI companies are buried under crippling lawsuits, that would just allow Chinese versions to dominate the international market for it. The Chinese AI called DeepSeek already surpassed Western LLMs in many ways, and China has never cared about Western intellectual property laws. Even if the very idea of intellectual property and copyright doesn't die, which I don't think it will, but it will be diminished, the multi-billion-dollar business model of licensing your IP and selling the brand for others to make movies, shows, t-shirts, and toys and such is inevitably going to die, and not only because of AI, but also because of 3D printing. Though licensing for merch will still be around as a small side hustle for artists and content creators, but it will no longer be a hugely lucrative business model for massive corporations like Disney, in my opinion. Like I hinted at already, terrific fan-made works of art was already becoming a huge problem for these IP licensing companies, even before generative AI accelerated things. The increasing amount of freelance artists and animators in the market, as well as increasingly sophisticated digital tools like Unreal Engine, was already bringing the cost of production down so much that small groups of dedicated fans were able to make amazing shows and animations that could genuinely compete with the content made by these massive companies in overpriced streaming services, which was scaring them. The Warhammer 40k community is a great example of this. It was filled with fantastic animations and fan projects, like Astartes, the Lord Inquisitor, and of course Alpha Boosa's text-to-speech device series. But especially the aforementioned Flash Gets guys here on YouTube. They're a good example of how sophisticated these fan projects could get. Now, I'm not an expert on this topic, but from what I understand, they were making fantastic parodies of Black Templars massacring furries, only to get copyright issues with Games Workshop, so they just launched Space King, which is just as much of a 40k knockoff as 40k is a knockoff of Dune, just getting more ludicrously big testicles with every iteration. The licensing business model beginning to die means the industry will have to change. A new business model for creative content will have to emerge. Probably as a communal model where the creators have close ties with their fans to encourage support but the most important thing will be the quality of the individual show, movie, or game. The product itself needs to be appealing to fans as the main selling point instead of relying on brand recognition. This appears to be what the FlashGits guys are doing. They even denied a lucrative offer from a large network that wanted to buy the Space King IP precisely because A, FlashGits could rely on fan support, and B, the quality of Space King that their fans love so much would get diluted as the older network chased a possibly obsolete sense of mass market appeal. Though for me, Space King is a little too edgy for my personal tastes, but a lot of people like it. We'll have to see how it goes, but I wish them good fortune. This video was written and recorded in the beginning of July, and who knows how long it will take to edit, so maybe when this video you're watching finally comes out, it will have already aged like milk, who knows. But so far, I don't think so, since my fellow YouTuber Joe Haver has also apparently rejected an offer from a network and is doing his own thing, adhering to this business model I'm talking about, relying on close ties to the community that likes him and focusing on the quality of his work. But I do think it's ironic that Games Workshop allegedly sacrificed the goodwill and connection they had with their fans, which is the future of the industry, only to chase the outdated IP licensing model that will soon die in a year or two. Since it doesn't matter how many fan projects and animators they go after, 40K content made with generative AI is already through the roof on YouTube, and any dedicated enough fan will soon be able to compete with whatever TV show Amazon Prime makes with their license. When it comes to AI and the theft of intellectual property, there's large, soulless corporations and small dedicated creatives on both sides of the issue. With Disney, Universal Studios, and independent artists who post their work online on one side of the issue, and Midjourney, OpenAI, Google, etc., with video editors and small YouTube content creators on the other side. Small YouTube content creators struggle in a competitive creative field as well. It's why many were excited for this new AI toy that they could use. We're all living in starving artist mode, my friends. Breakfast is coffee and cigarettes. Only I don't drink coffee or smoke, so I'm screwed. The intellectual property concept itself is interesting because it simultaneously incentivizes and limits art. It provides an incentive by allowing you to profit from your hard work and personal investment in your creation, while also limiting art by not allowing others to absorb your cultural contribution into their own contribution and thus build upon it, like how folklore, old stories, and music used to be a collective cultural effort. Copyright often limits what a work of art could be by limiting who can contribute to it, but it incentivizes new creations by allowing you to profit. It's a balance we have to walk. It's why we have the public domain and an expiration date on intellectual property copyrights that companies like Disney have tried to end. But when it comes to AI, the cheap and quick production of slop can be just as soulless and generic if lazily done by one guy using AI as it is by Hollywood on a multi-million-dollar budget. But they can also be great works of art by themselves. That Democratic People's Republic of the Penguins parody of Donald Trump's tariffs is definitely a great piece of art, in my opinion. It simply depends on how much human input you invest in what you're doing with AI. Since it has no soul on its own, and I think carefully made human work will always be better, it'll also be more expensive. And like I said, the current copyright model was already diminishing. Before we had the AI Stormtrooper vlogs done with VO3, there was this great fan parody series using the Unreal Engine to make great Stormtrooper parody animations. You guys should check it out. It's called For the Empire by the channel AFK. They single-handedly revived my love for Star Wars and got me reading Legends books again, which is a passion in me that Disney slop almost killed. So there we have an example of dedicated fans who don't own the IP, actually keeping it alive in the culture more than the soulless owners just trying to milk cash from it until it dies. Yet still, even with all that being said, I don't think the concept of intellectual property and copyright will completely die, nor do I think it should. Even though ideas and concepts are universal, and even though someone can make knockoff versions of your work, the little details matter too. It's the details in your story or art that you can truly own that often breathes life into your work. It's the little details that make the difference between something that resonates with the audience or something that does not. Both Harry Potter and Henry Thornmallow from the Wizard's Hall book are boy wizards that go to a castle-looking school for magic. But it's the characteristic lightning bolt scar on Harry Potter's forehead that he gained after an evil man destroyed his loving mother who sacrificed herself to save his life that makes him a truly magical character that captures our imaginations, when compared to the more muted Henry Thornmallow, who left less of an impression on readers even though he arrived at the scene much earlier. Jane Yolen is a great writer for what she does, and she arrived at this literal goldmine of a concept before J.K. Rowling, but it was the latter who, through a series of little details, truly hit gold. That's why adaptations often suck, because they change the little details, which makes these characters not the ones we fell in love with. I did mention earlier about the importance of the universal archetype that cannot be copyrighted, but you cannot rely on that by itself. It's not good just because people can recognize the archetype you're working with. You have to make it manifest as a real living person that they can identify with. And you do that by the details in your writing. So no, I don't think copyright or intellectual property will completely die. They protected the little details, which is what makes a work of art more than just generic version of a universal archetype. But the same way that the internet increased piracy of movies and shows by allowing people to watch them for free, which I do not condone, with AI, now people are able to pirate intellectual property where they don't need to pay for a license to make stuff about your characters. They could easily make a near blockbuster quality short film with their IP that others can watch, and there's nothing any of us can do as of right now. So, Warner Bros. Can invest $1 bajillion in a Harry Potter streaming show where characters are race-swapped for no reason, but disgruntled fans will just use AI to make a more accurate adaptation where Severus Snape isn't randomly a black dude, but is the same pale-faced, snarky ghoul that he is in the books. Like I said, the business model of licensing out your IP for the big bucks will probably die. And that is not necessarily a bad thing, since it will probably just convince companies to invest in what always was the real source of the magic, the quality of the individual movie or TV show that you're watching. Companies won't be able to rely on Star Wars or Harry Potter as a brand anymore. You will be able to see better versions online, whether in that copyright-friendly fanfiction ripoff way, or fan-made projects using AI or Unreal Engine for animation on the characters you know and love. The real selling point is whether or not the movie or show is actually good. Here's hoping this will be the case anyway. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Bethesda Studios for being cool on our Skyrim videos, and with their fan community as a whole. Bethesda is one of the few companies that understands the value of fan projects and communities and is doing what is necessary to survive in this new landscape by maintaining a good relationship with its fans. Even though there are a few controversies regarding that stuff, with the mods and everything, I know, but it's a learning process for all of us. And that's all I have to say for today. Thank you, my patrons, for all your help, and thank you all for listening to my ramblings. Have a good day, my friends.